The sun drops behind the canopy, the heat breaks, and then the deadbolts slide into place. Inside these mud walls, families sit in complete darkness, listening to the heavy rain. Because somewhere on the other side of that wood, something is waiting. For months, the monsoon rains drown everything else. This relentless downpour creates a blanket of white noise and erases all visibility. It is a blinding, deafening environment, the perfect cover for a creature that relies on ambush. Deep in Karnataka, small settlements sit right against the edge of ancient, dense wilderness. These homes are entirely cut off from modern infrastructure. There are no streetlights, no quick rescue. Before the rains brought the terror, life here followed a quiet, predictable rhythm. Farmers tended their livestock. Neighbors walked between homes on open dirt paths. The surrounding forest was simply a backdrop to daily routines, providing firewood and shade. That deep sense of routine created a blind spot. Decades of coexistence with the surrounding wilderness lulled the residents into a false security, leaving them completely unprepared for what was about to step out of the trees. The warnings started as quiet rumors. A traveler never arrived at the neighboring settlement. Then a farmer went out to check his crops before dusk and simply vanished. The confirmation came days later. Searchers found the remains dragged deep into the thick brush, far off the established footpaths. The physical evidence was clear. It was a partial consumption. Tigers typically avoid human contact, heavily preferring deer and wild boar. When they do attack human settlements, they target livestock. An apex predator actively selecting a human as its primary prey is a severe biological anomaly. Wildlife experts use a specific term for an animal that crosses this behavioral line: a man-eater. Once a tiger realizes humans are slow, deaf, and defenseless compared to wild game, it incorporates them into its standard diet. It rarely goes back to hunting animals. The single discovery of the farmer's body transformed the entire landscape. The forests that once provided for the community effectively pinned them inside their homes, turning the familiar terrain into a claustrophobic cage. Daily operations shut down entirely. The open-air markets emptied by mid-afternoon. Parents pulled their children indoors the moment they returned from school. The dirt paths connecting the properties laid completely abandoned. As the sun neared the horizon, a collective panic took hold. Entire families rushed to barricade their doors and windows, sitting on the floor in silence, waiting for the long night to pass. They tried to fight back the darkness. Men sat by the entrances holding farming axes and heavy wood-cutting tools. Outside, they kept large bonfires burning until dawn, hoping the flames would deter whatever was circling their homes. But the predator never showed itself in the light. It moved through the fog between the slender, dripping tree trunks with absolute silence. It would strike a straggler in a matter of seconds, then vanish back into the mist before an alarm could be raised. The trauma quickly mutated. The residents stopped looking for an animal and started flinching at the environment. A snapping twig, a rustling fern, a shifting shadow, every natural sound in the damp air registered as an immediate threat to their lives. The animal didn't need to be physically present to inflict damage. By hiding in the periphery, it forced the human mind to fill in the blanks, effectively breaking the psychological endurance of the entire region. The local authorities realized the situation was entirely out of control. They called in professional trackers, specialists trained specifically to locate and eliminate dangerous wildlife. These men moved methodically. They surveyed the kill sites. They measured paw prints pressed deep into the wet mud. They mapped the locations of the disappearances to plot the creature's hidden movement corridors. The map revealed a terrifying pattern. The attacks weren't random opportunism. The animal was deliberately staying near the high-traffic footpaths, sitting perfectly still for hours, watching how and when the villagers moved. It was analyzing their new defensive habits. Concealed in the dry brush, the tiger noted the changes in their schedules, figuring out exactly when the patrols passed and where the gaps in their vision were. The trackers understood immediately. Their rifles gave them a false sense of security. They were dealing with a highly intelligent observer that had already learned how to track them. To end the cycle, the men had to leave the paths. They crossed past the safety of the village clearings and stepped directly into the dense, suffocating core of the jungle. The canopy closed over them, blocking out the light. The deeper they pushed, the quieter it became. The usual chattering of monkeys and bird calls ceased entirely, leaving behind a dead, heavy stillness in the humid air. Every step required immense physical effort. Boots sank into the deep, slippery mud. Thick vines snagged at their gear. In this terrain, a single slip or a broken branch would instantly broadcast their exact location. The hunters felt the hair on their arms stand up. The sheer density of the vegetation meant visibility was cut down to a few feet. They knew, with cold certainty, that eyes were locked onto them from somewhere just beyond the leaves. Out here, firearms and radios offer zero protection. When plunged into millions of years of evolutionary design, the human tracking party was stripped of its advantages. They were in the predator's domain now. The camouflage finally broke. Through a brief clearing in the fog, the orange and black frame materialized, walking silently through the sparse timber. The lead tracker had only a fraction of a second to act before the animal vanished. He raised his rifle. A single thunderous crack ripped through the heavy air. And then, silence. The ringing faded into the damp trees. The massive body lay still in the underbrush, bringing an abrupt, violent halt to a campaign of terror that had lasted for months. When the news reached the perimeter, there were no massive celebrations. The exhausted villagers simply let out a long, heavy exhale, their physical bodies now completely drained by weeks of chronic, terrifying adrenaline. The immediate danger was terminated in less than 2 seconds, but the physiological damage inflicted on the people who lived through those terrifying nights would not wash away with the mud. Slowly, the rhythm of life started to resume. The heavy wooden doors unlocked during the day. The bonfires burned out. Neighbors carefully began walking dirt paths to trade and farm once again. Yet, the behavior of the village had permanently shifted. Many residents still flatly refused to ever walk outside after the sunset. On quiet nights, the residents freeze in their beds, swearing they can hear low, guttural growls drifting through the mist. The tree line represents a permanent sensory trigger. As the light fails and the fog rolls toward the homes, the edge of the forest serves as a visceral reminder of the predator that once treated this village as its personal hunting ground. Deep in the Karnataka timber, the natural world issued a brutal correction. When the concrete ends and the light fails, human dominance completely evaporates. Out here in the wild, we are still prey.